Despite my own enjoyment of the game, it was fair to say that following on from Call of Duty Ghosts, the general COD community was pretty dissatisfied with the franchise at this point. A lot of people felt that the game wasn't changing year on year, and so wanted something new. And that's what Advanced Warfare promised. It promised something completely radically different from anything we'd had before. The exosuits giving players the access to advanced three-dimensional movement was a huge diversion from what players were used to and anything the franchise had been before. But as we'll discuss, it didn't quite satisfy the community's demands for change, and I'll be covering that all as I revisit Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. Hi there everyone, I'm the guy with no gamer tag, and running up to this game coming out, I was fairly interested. I wouldn't say I was the most excited I've ever been, but I was interested to see what this game would do. It was promising something radically different, and that was something I'd really hoped for. And unfortunately, it didn't quite live up to my expectations, and ultimately wasn't quite my cup of tea. If we start looking at the campaign, it was a genuinely okay campaign, but it was nothing special. The game did make some major graphical improvements. Like the cutscenes in this game were fantastically done, and the CGI is very impressive to the point where in certain scenes you do actually double take it to see, is that actually a live action person? No, that is genuinely a computer generated model, and it was incredibly impressive to look at. The environment also did see some overhauls. There were definitely a lot more reflections, and it generally looked a more graphically impressive game than Ghosts was, and seemed like a little bit of a step forwards from it. But unfortunately, the beauty was skin deep on this one. The campaign, there was nothing particularly wrong with it, but there also wasn't anything that grabbed me and made me think, wow, that was really cool, that's like a really memorable moment. It really just felt like a very generic story, a very generic kind of gameplay, and it kind of felt like the sort of thing we'd played through many times before. I didn't feel like there were any new mechanics besides the 3D movement that were added in. The plot twists were reasonably easy to predict, and the story progressed in a very standard way. Whilst I wasn't expecting an emotional rollercoaster that would make me question all of my life choices, the game really didn't break any sort of molds. It did attempt a slightly different narrative where instead of it following an entire war, it was more the crusade of a private military organisation, which, surprise surprise, becomes tyrannical. I find it hilarious and ironic that America, through all their rejection of socialism, have a lot of stories about capitalist businesses being uncontrolled and turning tyrannical. That has made me chuckle a bit. And you can actually see some of those influences. There are certain scenes in this which are America as fuck. Like, it's laughable actually. Like, there's one particular bit which is a trailer for the Atlas Corporation in the game. And my god, like, the only thing it didn't do was have an eagle sweep in with an olive branch and, like, shit on a terrorist or something. Like, it was the only Merca thing that scene didn't do.
It felt like we could never find our way back. But we did. Together. When you were vulnerable.
And just generally, other than kind of laughing at some parts of the game, that was kind of the only enjoyment I got from it. I didn't feel like any of the level design was particularly noteworthy. I didn't feel like any of the new bits of stealth or new mechanics made the game stunning. It felt very on rails, and some of the new animations, like the magnetic gloves, felt incredibly clunky. And there were a lot of points in this campaign where it was frustrating because you were just left there waiting for your AI companions to get their asses to the next checkpoint. I don't know why they had this game design. I get it that they wanted to have dialogue and try and expose some of the world, like try and create a bit of atmosphere, which it didn't really succeed at. But you could walk to the checkpoint and then you're waiting like 30 seconds for your slow as hell companion to get there. And there's also just so many of these moments where you're movement locked and you can only walk at the slowest walking pace known to man. It's just ridiculous and kind of frustrating. As I said, the things I mainly enjoyed was just laughing at various parts of the games. Like later on where you get imprisoned. Honestly, it shouldn't be funny, but it was one of the most hilarious parts of the game for me because every time you try and turn around, you've got this unsighted guard who punches you and tells you to keep looking forwards. And I don't know why, but for me, it's one of the funniest things to do because you just go, stop looking, stop turning around, look forwards. And for some reason, getting punched in the face repeatedly was probably the most fun I had in this game. And despite saying that the game had made some graphical improvements, especially in the cutscenes, unfortunately, this didn't always transfer over to the in-game graphics, and it did lead to quite a bit of dissonance in certain places. Like, this particular cutscene about the character Ilona, who is this kind of cookie-cutter Russian badass woman who can be soft but also be scary as fuck. Wow, revolutionary. But the thing that made it really funny was the incredible dissonance in graphics in this particular scene. And I knew this was coming, I could remember this from when I first played it, so I actually decided to record a live reaction to this, having not seen it for about 5 or 6 years. Oh no. Yeah, Instagram filter memes, anybody? But overall, the campaign just didn't grab me. There was nothing spectacular about it. It had some good cutscenes, it had some good bits that always looked great for trailers, but overall, nothing did it for me. It was just a bit bland and pretty uninspired in my personal opinion. It did have some decent performances from the voice talent, including... Oh no. 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 Should we talk about multiplayer? Because this was really what players had bought the game to play. This is what Call of Duty has been known for, its multiplayer action. And players were hoping for change. This was where they really wanted something brand new and fresh to play. And the Exo Movement was very different. It was a completely different experience to all other Call of Duties. But for me personally, and I think for the wider community, it wasn't what we wanted. The Exo Movement, especially on console, became very difficult to control. If you didn't have a scuff controller or some other controller with extra buttons that you could use to make jumping easier while still keeping control of your thumbsticks, you basically were shit out of luck. Couple that with a weapon meta where it really revolved around 2 weapons, the BAL-27 and the ASM-1, just meant that there wasn't much variety, which ironically meant for a game that had jetpacks, lasers and futuristic tech, it was just overall a very bland experience because there was no diversity in the meta. It was you use those 2 guns, or you basically expect to not do very well in the game. And then it came also with the supply drops. And admittedly, when they first came out, they built quite a bit of hype around the game. Players were excited to try and get that really good variant. And then it just went downhill. They added the advanced supply drops where players could now pay to get these loot boxes, so they got a massively increased chance of getting one of the best weapon variants in the game. And it just made the whole variant system lose all of its appeal. Whereas before everyone had the same RNG luck, now players could artificially buy their way into better weapons, and they could pay for an advantage. This was not fun, and it's sad to say that this isn't even the worst this series got to with this sort of mechanic. Unfortunately, they kept plugging and chugging and milking the cash cow for years to come, but this was the game where it all started, and it's the sort of thing that turned me away from the game. I did play it for quite a while. The main thing I sought to do was trying to complete some challenges. I quite enjoyed the uplink game mode, even though I was one of about 10 people who did, and I wanted to try and get all the challenges done. But yet again, there were some oversights here. The thing that really pissed me off was there was a challenge where you had to get most valued player a certain number of times. But even if you win with the top score, if an enemy player has a higher score than you, they get given MVP. The thing that annoyed me the most was I think I was actually 1 game away from getting this challenge done, and I was carrying my team. I had, I think, 12 out of 20 captures. I had a decent amount of kills, somewhere between 15 and 20 kills, and yet I lost out on getting most valued player to a player that got 40 kills because they sat and glitched inside a wall and couldn't be killed, which just really was kind of one of the last nails in the coffin. I found that the networking in this game also was a little bit suboptimal. It wasn't awful, but I found that if I was ever playing against a Dutch player, I could not compete. It felt like I was half a second behind and I would die instantly. This is probably the only game that I've ever played where I was actively going through the lobby and checking players' profiles to work out where they were from, because you got matched with players from all over the place. Occasionally, in the UK, you could get matched up with Japanese players, which made no real sense, and it really led to the players becoming paranoid about skill-based matchmaking, which has continued from then onwards. But I'm not going to sit here and say that everything about the multiplayer was awful. I did have some enjoyment when I went back to it. I enjoyed going back and using the S12 Shotgun. This was a full auto shotgun which had a ridiculously high fire rate, and especially when you could use a perk which allows you to sprint and shoot at the same time. It was basically my favourite cheesing class. You can just sprint and use this incredibly fast firing shotgun to just demolish people in close range. I also had some enjoyment using the AK-12 again. I was able to feel like a little bit of a pub star. But at the end of the day, it just never really did it for me. When I go back and play it now, the game just doesn't feel satisfying. Going on a kill streak doesn't really do it for me in this game, and there's nothing really else that I want to try and achieve. So ultimately, the game kind of lives up to what I was expecting from it. This was one of the first games where I just completely quit playing it and went and played other games instead. This was one of the only Call of Duties where I decided, no, I've just had enough. And ultimately, the main legacy that this game has had is that it actually kind of freed me from the franchise in a way. Up until this point, I was just buying into the hype. That was the main reason I got this game. I didn't know it was going to be good. I didn't know whether I was going to enjoy it or not. And I just bought in because I enjoyed Call of Duty. And I thought, I want to play it. I want to upload it. I want to try out this game. But in the end, when I found out that I just didn't enjoy it and was not interested in playing it for the full year, I realised that, you know what, I don't have to buy this game. I'm not obliged to. I don't have any reason to, unless I actually want to play it. And that's something that I carried forwards. And that's probably the best thing that came from this game, was it finally got me to realise that there's no point in buying a game unless you actually want it and it actually does something that you enjoy. But another positive with this particular game was that I started to interact with another content creator called ToxicChillz. We were both small channels at the time, and I quite enjoyed having a back and forth with them over various videos on Call of Duty amongst other games. And eventually he ended up making the end screen, which I've been using for a number of years now. So every cloud does truly have a silver lining. But I am interested to hear what you all think of this game. As I've said, it was nothing groundbreaking, it promised change and actually felt very samey, to the point where it's almost not memorable in certain places. It wasn't the worst thing to go back and play it, it wasn't completely awful, but at the same time, I'm not going to be in any rush to go back and play it again. But anyway, I do hope you've enjoyed this video. I've been the guy with no gamer tag, and I'll see you on another video.